This project started with nothing more than a raw walnut tree trunk, rough, cracked, and full of character. But I didn't see firewood. I saw potential. I saw something timeless waiting to be brought to life. In this video, I'll take you through a two-part woodworking journey, from carving a walnut bowl by hand, to shaping a matching rustic serving tray underneath it using traditional hand-carving power tools. In the first part of this project, I focused on the wooden bowl. Using only wood carving tools and a lot of patience, I slowly removed layer after layer until the shape began to appear. Every curve, every groove, every mark you see was guided by hand. I didn't follow a template, I followed the grain. This walnut wood had a story of its own, and I just helped reveal it through bowl carving techniques passed down through generations. The wood had natural cracks that told its history, but I needed to stabilize them for functionality. I carefully filled these cracks with clear epoxy resin, turning what some might see as flaws into beautiful character lines. The epoxy resin repair not only strengthened the bowl but created stunning contrast against the rich walnut grain. This is modern woodworking meeting traditional craftsmanship. I added a simple vintage-style pattern around the rim, not too perfect, because perfection isn't the goal. It's about feeling. It's about connecting to something real through traditional woodworking. In the second part, I carved a tray or board to sit underneath the bowl, from the same piece of walnut. I wanted it to feel like one piece, one soul. The edges are left natural, flowing with the original tree shape. The handle is carved in by hand, blending functionality with raw beauty. This is what makes a truly handmade bowl set special. I finished both the bowl and the tray with a rich oil that enhances the deep chocolate grain of the walnut, giving it a classic, antique finish look, like something passed down through generations. This vintage bowl technique transforms modern work into timeless art. This wasn't just about making a bowl and tray. It was about honoring the wood and creating something lasting through rustic woodworking. Whether you're a woodworker or someone who appreciates handmade craftsmanship, I hope this inspires you to slow down and create with your hands. If you enjoy traditional woodworking with modern carving tools, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what would you carve from a walnut tree trunk like this? Sanding is what really brings the shape and feel of the bowl to life. On the outside, I stopped at 80 grit, just enough to smooth the surface but keep that rustic, handmade texture. I wanted it to still show the old style. But on the inside, where it will be touched or used more, I went much finer, sanding all the way up to 400 grit. That gave it a soft, smooth finish that feels great in the hand. This contrast between rough and smooth adds character, and helps the oil finish absorb beautifully where it matters most. During the wood bowl carving process, I reached a point that many woodworkers know well, discovering a crack. It was long, slightly deep, and ran along the grain of the walnut bowl. Now, I had two choices: I could cut it out and reshape the bowl entirely. Or I could embrace it. To me, those cracks, those so-called imperfections, are the wood's memories. They're not mistakes. They're stories from traditional woodworking. So I decided to preserve it, not just structurally, but emotionally. And for that, I turned to epoxy resin. Epoxy resin allows you to reinforce wood while highlighting its natural beauty. It doesn't hide the crack. It makes it stronger. It makes it stand out in a beautiful way, almost like a vein of glass running through the heart of the walnut wood. But here's the thing: epoxy resin mixing needs to be treated with care and precision. It's not something you just pour in and hope for the best. To do wood crack repair right, you have to mix the resin and hardener in the correct ratio, usually 1:1, depending on the brand. Always check the instructions on your epoxy resin product. Some types require a 2:1 mix, so read carefully. Mixing the wrong ratio can leave your resin soft, sticky, or brittle. I use a measurement to measure both parts exactly for epoxy wood repair. After measuring, I pour the two parts together and begin stirring, slowly and thoroughly, for at least 3 minutes. I don't rush this epoxy resin tutorial. You have to scrape the sides and bottom of the cup as you stir, because even a little unmixed resin can ruin the final result. Bubbles may form as you mix, but that's normal. Once it's fully blended, I let it sit for about 1 to 2 minutes before pouring. This allows the mixture to settle a bit, and reduces the air trapped inside. Some people use a heat gun or torch to help pop the bubbles after pouring. Just be very careful if you do this, and never overheat the surface. Now I begin the pour for wood restoration. I don't flood it, I guide the resin carefully into the crack, letting it flow and find its way into every space. I work slowly and patiently. Sometimes it takes more than one pass, it depends on the depth of the gap. And I always make sure my surface is level, so the resin doesn't drift. Once it's filled, I let the piece rest for 24 hours in a clean, dust-free space. It's important not to touch it, move it, or rush it. That curing time is what makes the bond strong, a quiet moment for the resin to do its work. In the end, the crack is no longer a weakness. It's part of the design. It adds contrast, clarity, and meaning. Some would say the piece was broken, I say it's more complete than ever. Like the Japanese philosophy of kintsugi woodworking, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, this resin isn't hiding the damage, it's celebrating it. This step reminded me why I love this craft. Wood is alive. It changes, it splits, and it teaches us to adapt. With epoxy resin, we're not just fixing cracks. We're choosing to respect the journey the wood has taken, and giving it a new story to tell. So now we're in part 2 of this walnut woodworking project. In this section, I'm starting the wooden tray or cutting board that goes under the bowl, made from the same walnut wood. But how to turn a rough slab into a functional, handmade cutting board using woodworking projects techniques. And remember that epoxy resin we used earlier to fix the crack? Now it's time to remove the extra and clean the surface, but what's the best way to sand epoxy resin art without damaging the wood? I'll show you the exact resin sanding technique that works every time. Also, how to give a brand new wooden bowl that old, vintage look, the kind that feels like it's been passed down through generations. What wood carving tools do I use to age the surface? And how to safely use wood burning techniques to bring out its natural character and create that authentic distressed wood finish using aging wood methods. At the end, I apply a special wood finish oil, but which food-safe finish did I use, and why? This wood conditioning step is crucial for any handmade wooden bowl that will actually be used. Stick around, because I'll be breaking down each woodworking step in detail, and showing you how to bring this walnut tray and bowl set to life, one step at a time using DIY woodworking methods. Now it's time for one of the most important, and often overlooked, parts of the woodworking process, wood sanding. This is where the raw surface becomes something smooth, touchable, and ready for wood finishing. I start with 40 grit sandpaper. It's rough, aggressive, and perfect for removing tool marks, shaping edges, and leveling down any high spots using coarse grit sanding. It's not about making it perfect at this stage, it's just the beginning of wood preparation and surface preparation. Next, I move to 80 grit sandpaper. This step starts to clean up the heavy scratches left by the 40 using progressive sanding techniques. You can already feel the difference with your hand, smoother, but still raw. This is essential sanding wood technique for any woodworking project. From there, I move through 120 grit, then 180 grit, gradually reducing the scratch marks and bringing out more of the wood grain. Every grit removes the lines from the grit before it using hand sanding methods, and each one takes you a step closer to that smooth finish. After that, I move to 240 grit, then 320 grit, and finally 400 grit sandpaper. At 400 grit, the surface is incredibly smooth using fine grit sanding. You can glide your hand across the wood and feel nothing but grain and warmth. It's not just for looks, this smooth wood surface allows the finish oil to soak in evenly, giving better color and wood protection. Wood sanding isn't just a technical step, it's where the piece starts to come alive using traditional woodworking methods. You feel the shape, the texture, the story in your hands. It's slow work using woodworking techniques. But it's the kind of slow that makes everything worth it for any wood restoration project. After shaping, carving, and wood sanding the bowl, I wanted to take it a step further, not just to make something smooth and functional, but to give it a sense of age, character, and history. My goal was to make this walnut bowl feel like it came from another time, like it had already lived a story. To do that, I used a combination of two traditional woodworking techniques, scratching the surface with a wire cut brush, and burning it gently with a torch. These two wood aging techniques, when done carefully, can transform the entire feel of a piece. First, I mounted this wire brush onto my angle grinder. It might look aggressive, but when used with control and light pressure, it becomes a really creative woodworking tool. I didn't use it to clean or remove material, I used it to etch texture into the outside of the bowl. I followed the natural grain, brushing outward to highlight the growth lines and valleys in the walnut wood. This gave the surface a gently worn look, not perfectly smooth, but beautifully weathered. The brushing reveals subtle changes in density within the wood. It brings out those natural lines and knots that might be invisible on a flat, polished surface. This wood texturing technique is great if you're going for a vintage wood, old-style look. It gives the piece more life, more depth. And it works especially well on hardwoods like walnut that already have a rich, dramatic grain. Once the brushing was done, it was time for the next step, wood burning. I used a torch to gently scorch the outside of the bowl. This is a method inspired by an old Japanese woodworking technique called shusugi ban, traditionally used to preserve wood, but here I'm using it more for its visual effect. I moved the flame slowly and evenly, never letting it stay in one spot too long. I wasn't trying to burn or damage the piece, just to deepen the surface color, create contrast, and give it a lived-in, rustic feeling. The flame reacts differently depending on the wood's texture, softer areas darken more, while the harder grain resists, creating a layered look. There's something really satisfying about watching the fire change the wood. It's like the bowl is coming to life in a new way, smoky, warm, and aged. But I didn't stop there. After the burning, I brought back the same wire brush again, not to add more scratches this time, but to clean up the surface and soften the char. I lightly brushed over the burned areas, removing just a bit of the blackened layer, letting the original wood peek back through. This step is really important, it blends everything together. You keep the character of the burn without making it look too harsh or overdone. You reveal the beauty beneath the black, and create a beautiful contrast between the dark and low points in the lighter raised grain. It's a balance. Too much burn, and the piece looks damaged. Too little, and it just looks stained. But when you take the time to scratch, burn, and then brush back, you create something truly unique. Something that feels like it's been around for years, even though you just made it with your own hands using handmade woodworking techniques. After all the carving, the texturing, the burning, and hours of careful sanding, we finally arrive at one of the most rewarding parts of the entire process, the wood finish. This is the moment when all the hard work starts to glow, when the wood takes on a new life. It's not just about making it shiny or smooth. It's about bringing out the soul of the piece. The wood finishing connects everything, the shape, the grain, the texture, the story. For this walnut bowl and tray, I chose to use a food-safe finish. Why? Because I wanted the final piece to be more than just a showpiece. I wanted it to be useful. Safe for serving, functional, and beautiful, something that belongs in your hands, on your table, not just behind glass. Now, top oil works differently from wood stain or lacquer. It doesn't sit on the surface like a plastic layer. Instead, it soaks into the wood fibers, bonding from within. It nourishes the grain, strengthens the fibers, and creates a protective barrier that still allows the wood to breathe. It resists water, stains, and even small scratches, all while keeping the natural feel of the surface. For this woodworking project, I used two different tones of wood oil to create a deeper, layered look. First, I started with the natural wood oil, a soft, warm finish that gently highlights the natural grain without changing the color too much. As soon as I applied it, the walnut wood came alive. The patterns popped, the swirls became more pronounced, and the contrast between light and dark areas grew richer. You could see every detail, every growth line, every knot, every mark that was carved or shaped by hand. It's moments like this that remind you why walnut finish is such a treasured hardwood. It responds so beautifully to finish. Then, after the natural coat had settled in, I applied a second layer, this time using a walnut-colored penetrating oil. This deeper tone added just the right amount of age and character. It enhanced the darker areas of the burned textures, and it brought a golden richness to the lighter ones. It made the piece feel more grounded, like it had been passed down through generations. Now, once the first coat of wood sealer was applied, I didn't rush things. I let the piece rest for 24 hours. That's key. The oil needs time to penetrate, to cure, and to harden inside the fibers. If you try to add a second coat too soon, it won't settle properly. But if you wait, the results are worth it. I worked it into the surface using a clean cloth, letting it find its way into every groove, every textured detail. This oil not only built up the wood protection, it also unified the color, smoothed out the tones, and gave the surface a silky, satin finish that feels just right to the touch. The wood looked complete, full of depth, full of life, and fully protected. This combination of clear and tinted oil created a finish that feels both natural and timeless. It didn't cover up the grain, it celebrated it. It worked with everything that came before: the hand tools, the wire brush, the flame, the sanding, the carving. All of it came together in this final surface. And the best part, since it's food grade, you can actually use it. Serve fruit, bread, nuts, or just enjoy it as a beautiful centerpiece that catches the light and invites touch. It's practical and poetic at the same time. For me, finishing isn't just the end. It's a moment of reflection. A chance to look at the piece and see everything that went into it, and everything it now becomes. With the right Danish oil, with the right timing, and with patience, the finish becomes a voice for the wood. It speaks through color, through warmth, through texture. It says, this was made by hand, and made to last. After the first coat of oil, I let it dry for 24 hours. Once it was fully cured, I applied a second coat. This layer really deepened the color, added more protection, and gave the wood a smooth, natural finish. It's a small step, but it makes a big difference in how the piece looks and lasts. And there it is, our handcrafted walnut bowl transformed from rough wood into functional art. If this woodworking journey inspired you, hit that like button. It helps other woodworkers discover these traditional techniques. Subscribe to Old Oakwood because next video. Drop a comment. Do you prefer the rustic texture or smooth finish? I read every one. Share this with anyone who loves handmade craftsmanship, and check out my playlist for more step-by-step tutorials. Remember, every piece of wood has a story. With patience and respect for the craft, you can bring that story to life. Keep creating, and I'll see you in the workshop next episode.